Philosophical thinking is distinct from ordinary everyday thinking. Philosophy follows a certain framework.
What is Darsana? Our philosophy was superior because our sages saw something that was shown to them by a higher entity.
Madhavacharya, he is a philosopher of the 14th century. He wrote a book called Sarva Darshana Sangraha. Each Darshana gives a framework upon which you build a science or you build a Shastra. These Darshanas is nothing about belief. They are giving us the logic, the reason, the pramanas to arrive at what they are explaining, what they are proposing. They are actually, most of them are actually hypotheses. They are intelligent guesses.
Why should I even be bothered about Vedas in the time of AI, in the times of technology, in the times when we are living in a material world? Why should I even think about it?
Vedas is that corpus of knowledge which has many things. This we are talking about a civilizational corpus of knowledge. Upanishadic knowledge is most of the time in the form of negation, what we call neti neti, because it is not something that you can observe directly, and therefore how do you arrive at a truth that you cannot directly observe with your five senses?
Dr. Rajeev, first of all, welcome to Discovery of an Author podcast. It is truly my honor to have someone of your status and stature to be on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you, Raghavji.
Great. Dr. Rajeev, I'm going to start with the first question directly. Let's start with the fundamental. First, explain to our viewers the term philosophy and its origin. What is philosophy?
Yeah, wonderful. So the word philosophy is actually a Greek word, philos. Philos means the philosophy comes from the root words philos and logos, so which means a love of wisdom, right? So to understand the nature of, to obtain true knowledge about the world, that is the word, that is the meaning of philosophy, for the love of wisdom. But see the interesting thing, scientists, whatever field you are in, scientists, when they get their apex degree, it's called PhD, doctorate in philosophy. It's not doctorate in science. The scientists get a doctorate in philosophy. So why is this the case? This was one of the interesting questions I had. Nobody asked me, this came to me. Why are scientists called the highest knowledge, people with highest knowledge in philosophy and not sciences? And then that's where I went into the past and the history. We have philosophers throughout the world. Philosophy simply means systematic study of knowledge or reality. Now, philosophical thinking is distinct from ordinary everyday thinking, right? So ordinary everyday thinking is just you have random thinking that comes and goes. Every day we are thinking about something. But the difference between philosophical thinking and ordinary everyday thinking is philosophy follows a certain framework. It just can't be random thinking. It has to follow a certain framework. So philosophers use a certain logical framework, and wherever they come from, if it could be Greek philosophy, it could be Indian philosophy, it could be Chinese or African philosophy also. So they follow a certain philosophical rigor. They follow a framework. They follow a systematic, logical reasoning to arrive at their conclusions, whatever that is. And see, philosophy, when we say philosophy, it should always be, you would appreciate more if I distinguish that from faith. Faith is based on belief. So you don't need to have proof to have faith in something. You can believe in somebody else's revelation. Somebody might say, I have seen God, or I have understood reality, and you simply follow what that person has said, and that becomes that is why you call religions as faith. In the West, where I'm from, where I live in, you call Christian faith. You don't call, I mean, you can call Christian religion, but you also call it Christian faith, because you have faith in a certain individual who had a certain revelation, and you say, I believe in it. I don't need proof. I just believe in it. So that is my salvation. That is my, what they call in their terms, in our terms, moksha. My salvation is through faith and not through knowledge. So in contrast to faith, you get this philosophy where you need reasoning, and we'll come to eventually, hopefully we'll come to a stage where we're going to talk about how philosophy became science. In the past, every thinker was called natural philosopher. Thinkers were called natural philosophers. Eventually, during the Enlightenment, what we call Enlightenment period, interestingly, Westerners call it Enlightenment period between the 16th to 18th century. I mean, there is a debate between when the Enlightenment period started and when it stopped. So that Enlightenment period in the West of 16th to 18th century, there is a shift from natural philosophy or philosophy into science. So they started diversing humanities from sciences. That's where the philosophy split and became, you can have ethics, morality, judiciary, sociology. All these things are also philosophical thinking, right? They're all philosophies, but they're distinct from material sciences such as physics, biology, mathematics, medicine, chemistry, or technology these days, what have you. So they're distinct from it. So philosophy in general means the love of knowledge, and it follows a distinct framework to arrive at its conclusion or to arrive at truth.
So basically what you're saying then is, if I can take the framework or the foundations of philosophy and modify it, more schools can emerge. Like even science is in a way could be a different form of philosophy, because you take the core principles of reasoning and then you apply practicality and theory and proof, and that ecosystem then becomes science.
Yes,
material science, right? Is this safe to say then that philosophy is the foundation of every theory, be it scientific theory, be it even religious theory, be it even anything? So is thinking then the core?
Yeah, that's a very good question and a very good observation also, because philosophy, as we said, it is based on reason, right? It is based on reason. So let me give you a few examples. I like to use Eastern and Western concepts just so there is a distinction and better understanding of it. By contrasting, sometimes you get better understanding of it. So in our or Indian or Bharatiya philosophy, we distinguish mind from, or antahkarana, which is the inner organs, right? Antahkarana means inner organ, from bahya karana. Bahya karana is my all outer, senses and parts or organs of perception, organ of action, everything is bahya karana. So antahkarana means the inner organ, literally, direct translation. Mano, buddhi, ahankara, chittam. These four are called the inner organs. This is based on reasoning, right? This is based on pure reason. Nobody can falsify this.
Yeah.
You cannot disprove this. Manas, buddhi, ahankara, and chittam. These are four different distinctions that our philosophers divided within what happens with our inner space, the thinking space that happens. So manas means sankalpa vikalpatmakam. See, they have defined everything. Sankalpa vikalpatmakam manaha means, so when you want to make a decision whether you want to buy something, not to buy, choose something, not to choose, everything happens on an everyday basis for us. So should I do this? Should I not do it? Should I pick something? Should I not pick something? Right? Should I eat something? Should I not eat something? So this is the characteristics of that part of the antahkarana that does this activity. Sankalpa, vikalpa, atmakam, manaha. So there is a definition. So manas, next higher level is buddhi. So what buddhi does is nishchayatmika buddhi. And from these available options, the buddhi comes and says, based on my past experience or based on the available information I have, I'm going to do this, I'm going to pick this. Yes, I'm going to eat this, I'm going to pick this, I'm going to buy this, I'm going to choose this. So that is the characteristic of buddhi. So manas buddhi, nishchayatmika buddhi. And then antahkarana. Antahkarana is the agent who is actually doing all this. Aham karomi iti ahankaraha. There is an agency within us. I'm not saying whether it is an illusion or illusionary agent or a real agent. That is a different, a completely different concept and subject itself. So there is an agency within us that is actually owning it. That is saying, yeah, I am the one who is making this decision. Mano, buddhi, ahankara, chittam. Chittam is the subconscious, but in English it is the subconscious, where all this information is stored. And then our manas and buddhi, or buddhi picks knowledge or picks information from this chittam, from the subconscious, to make its decisions. So mano, buddhi, ahankara, chittam. Now see, this is reasoning. Right? This is what is called philosophical thinking. So there is antahkarana, there is bahya karana. And now science comes and says, yeah, this is great. You're doing great reasoning and I cannot falsify it, but show me the proof. Now, what science in the 14th, 15th century onwards, there is a shift in the concept of, from philosophy, science emerged. Science said, by the way, the word science also used to mean philosophy in the past. Philosophers were called scientists were called natural philosophers. Science was also including all aspects of thinking, including ethics, morality, art. Everybody used to be called natural philosophers. That is why you see Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all these were natural philosophers. They were also healers. They were also physicians, some of them. Hippocrates, for instance, natural philosophers. I'm giving the example of what philosophy meant in the West because there was a lot of change that happened in the West. In contrast to us, where not much of a change has happened in this. So by contrast, we'll understand it better. So coming back to the 14th and 15th century, where there was questioning of authority. Medieval period in the West used to be called the Dark Ages, because not much actually advanced in our understanding of the world, in our understanding, because there were so many pandemics happening, so many, the Black Death and everything. So people were not advancing their understanding of health and disease. And so there was a lot of frustration among the philosophical or the scientific community. They said, no, this is not working. We are not understanding. We're not using nature to our benefit. And therefore, we have to disrupt how the thing was happening, how philosophy was being studied using reason. Okay. So they said, we need to transform the way we understand about nature and about ourselves by bringing in empiricism. Empiricism means we need direct perception. That is why when we go to medical college, see, you can see this between Western medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. In Ayurvedic medicine, the first year Ayurvedic medical students, if it is a pure Ayurveda, not the hybrid Ayurveda, what is followed now, it is called integrative Ayurveda, what is currently followed. And then there is a reason for that. I gave a lecture called How They Killed Ayurveda. It is a podcast or it is a lecture that I gave about a year ago, how pure Ayurveda or Shuddha Ayurveda transformed into a hybrid model where they study both Western medicine and Ayurvedic philosophy. Actually, they study 70% in Ayurvedic, 70% Western medicine, and only 60 to 70% Western medicine and 30 to 40% Ayurvedic medicine.
Actually. That's very weird. I mean, that's like not even that means it's not even Ayurvedic anymore.
It is called integrative medicine. Actually, it is called integrative Ayurvedic medicine. There is a reason for that, because the colonizers were actually at the verge of killing Ayurveda in its entirety. Yeah. And so they came to a consensus saying that, okay, we are going to let your Ayurveda survive only if you introduce Western medicine into your schools, Ayurvedic schools. And so into the curriculum, this was pre-independence, into the curriculum in 1920s, 1910s, around that time, exactly 100 years ago, actually. So they had to introduce and integrate like a hybrid model into it. So I'm not talking about the current Ayurveda. I'm talking about if it were to be a pure, where they practice Guru Shishya Parampara type of thing in Kerala schools of Ayurveda, you are actually taught more or less pure form of Ayurveda. Not in the government colleges, but in the privately owned Vaidyas in Kerala and other places. I'm sure there is more in maybe Varanasi and other places too, but I know the one in Kerala, many in Kerala. So in that, when I was a medical student in my first year, first day, I went and dissected a corpse. You know why? That is because Western medical science included empiricism into along with reason, and said unless you directly observe the human body, you are not part of the scientific community. So there is a culture that developed within scientific community where empiricism means, the word empiricism means direct experience. The word direct experience in the sense direct perception, that is a pramana, right? Pramana means pramakaranam in Sanskrit. So I'm kind of mixing both East and West and Sanskrit and English here, because it's pretty fascinating how you study these histories and you kind of understand both together. So pramana means the tool you use to understand something, right? So your vision is your pramana for direct perception, pratyaksha pramana, right? So I'm seeing you, I know you are Raghavji because I'm directly seeing you and hearing you and things like that, right? So pratyakshanam. When I talk to you on the phone, that is not directly seeing you, but I'm hearing you, and then I'm connecting. Oh, Raghavji looks like this, and he sounds like this, so it must be Raghavji. That is anumana, that is inference. So you have so many: pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, ardhapatti, anupalabdhi, and shabda pramana. So you have major six types of pramanas. Of these, empirical science said, I'm going to use only direct perception and inference. Inference is using logic, that is reason, the philosophers use, and empiricism is direct observation. I should be able to locate, isolate, analyze, and experiment on something for it to become part of science. So that is why when I say antakarana, manobuddhi hankara chittam, it is very logical. It makes sense, right? So when I explain all this to you, it makes sense. But you as a person of science based on empiricism, you ask me, show it to me. I want to experiment on it. I want to locate it. I want to isolate it. I want to analyze it. I want to experiment upon it. That is where science differs from pure philosophy. Philosophy is based on reason, not based on faith. There is no faith in what I said, right? There is no faith in, you don't need to believe in anything. I'm giving out the reasoning behind it. I'm also telling you many other things. I'm saying, see, your life depends on the external environment. Along with the sun, your hormones also change. It's called circadian rhythm. The word circadian also comes from sarka, means about, roughly, about, roughly. Dian, D-I-A-N, dian means day, about a day. Roughly between day and night, your body changes hormonally, metabolically, everything changes. So you are never living in isolation. You are never living in a lab controlled experiment. You are always in communion with nature. It is reasoning, right? But how do you experiment on this? How do you control everything so that you only study on you and the rise of sun and fall? So it becomes difficult. But the empirical scientists said, we understand there are limitations to it, but for it to become part of the Western science, I'm calling it Western science because we are also, it is a world science now. It is not just limited to the West. Just like PhD is not limited to the West. It originated in the West. The idea of the PhD, which is the apex degree, originated in the West, but it became global. Similarly, science became global, but it has certain limitations. So you can't isolate You can locate, isolate, analyze, and experiment on everything in this world, right? You have to take it by reason. So science says there are certain things that are beyond science. We are not going to study it. Only things that are experimentable, that are quantifiable. I cannot quantify manobuddhi hankara chittam. There is no way to quantify it. There is no way to objectify it. There is no way that I can isolate it, but it makes intuitive sense, right? So when I explain it this way, so there is reason. There is in the period of what we call the Renaissance period, 14th and 15th century, where Rene Descartes and Francis Bacon, after him Isaac Newton, and after him many other philosophers, Immanuel Kant, Hegel, and them, they started developing this theory of science which distinguished itself from pure philosophy. But there are certain limitations in it. So interestingly, when this was happening in the 14th and 15th century, Bharatiya philosophy started seeing its downfall. Up until then, there was extraordinary intellectual rigor that was happening, debates and meetings and dialectics and logic was happening in intellectual, philosophical or knowledge milieu. The ecosystem was so vibrant with knowledge. And by that time, when we started seeing the colonizers, because what happens when we are in poverty, we are focused on surviving, right? So when we were going through, when we don't have money to make ends meet, you can be thinking of philosophy, knowledge, and advancing your knowledge.
Or food in a body. Or food in a body. When you are malnourished,
you cannot. So what happened was, during that time, so it took about 100 to 200 years of, see, at that time also, what happened was, you have to understand the history. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
Just reading philosophy doesn't make sense. You have to understand what was happening outside the boundaries of Bharatvarsha.
So geographies also have a very important role in shaping the philosophy. Absolutely. Because philosophy, I feel, what I'm getting from you is subjective. It can change from geography to geography, from people to people, from situation to situation. You can never have one philosophy which will go on agreeable for thousands of years. Because the earth and the nature and the conditions and the people, that's not going to remain static. It's going to change. Right. So you have philosophies which will have to evolve and not be static.
Yeah. See what happened. That is why it's important to have nations which are economically prosperous. It's very important to bring us, all of us, out of poverty, so that we start investing into the things that matter, that can, see, the disruptive knowledge thinking happens only when you are provided. That is why when the kings were flourishing in the medieval period and pre-medieval period, medieval period is roughly between 500 AD to 1100 AD, roughly that period, because this is all Western concepts, right? So, but we are using this Western terminology to understand where we stand in the historical arc of our civilization. So there is Greek civilization, which spans between 600 and roughly 600, 700, or maybe even 800 BCE, before the Common Era, up until 1 AD or 1 to 2 AD or so, when the Roman Empire came forward, and then it lasted for about 500 years, Roman Empire. So the Roman emperors took over the Greek knowledge, Greek philosophy. Greek philosophers are nothing but the people we already know. Socrates, the most common, most popular ones, Pythagoras, Socrates,
Plato. Marcus Aurelius is also Greek.
Marcus Aurelius is a Roman emperor, a philosopher. Yeah, so he was a Roman emperor. So so Marcus. So there is this movie. I forget the name of the movie. Gladiator. Right? Gladiator 1.
He was there. Marcus Aurelius as a character was there.
The old man who dies. Yeah, the old man who dies. He was Marcus Aurelius. That was during that period.
And Odyssey and what do you call Iliad? These are the philosophical texts, right?
They are philosophical texts. They consider in the Greek philosophy one of the oldest texts, very vast and oldest text. before Socrates,
Okay.
before them.
Okay.
So 200 to 300 years before them, if I'm not wrong. So you have that kind of civilizational continuity in the West, in the Greek, for a long time. And then Roman Empire came. And after the fall of Roman Empire in the 5th century, 4th or 5th century, around that time, it's very difficult to say when some people say 424 and around that time. From then to 11 to or 1200 CE, Common Era, which we now call AD, used to be called AD, now we call it CE. That period is a black period in the Western Hemisphere. That period is called the medieval period or the dark period, where no intellectual advancement happened because of there was no political unity, and then there was poverty, not the poverty that we define now, but there was no political unity, and so there was always wars and things like that going on, and therefore new thinking did not happen. During that time, when I researched into the Indian philosophies, a lot of intellectual rigor was happening in Indian subcontinent.
So now that we have understood philosophy from the Western perspective, also now that we have understood what joins philosophy and science and what are the differences in the history, I want to go in the sutra. But before that, tell me then, what is Darshana? Let's start from the fundamentals. Now we have understood from the Western point of view. Let's now understand what is Darshana. Is Darshana the Indian equivalent of philosophy? And one myth I want you to demystify upon Darshana. Darshana, people generally say, that I have also read in books, is that which one sees.
Yes.
That which one sees. And in today's time, when people hear this statement, they come up with the conclusion that our philosophy was superior because our sages saw something that was shown to them by a higher entity. The only basis for people to think that Indian philosophy is extremely superior, and I'm not saying it's not superior, but the basis that people think it's superior is because of this word Darshana, which is what you see. Then it implies that there was a higher being who came and he's like, look at this, now you write it down. So I want to demystify this ecosystem. Start with Darshana, its meaning, and then Indian philosophical ecosystem, and this statement.
Absolutely. Raghavji, so kind of as we go along, if I explain a concept, go off the tangent, so bring me back.
Absolutely.
So, because this is such a vast and there is so much
and very exciting, and it's very exciting as well. Okay,
so Darshana comes from, let me start with the etymology. It's very interesting to look at the etymology too, if you learn a little Sanskrit. So Darshana comes from the word drush pashyati. Drush means pashyati, to see. It comes from the word drush, to see. Seeing what? Seeing a certain thing through a certain type of lens, right? Seeing, see, when I look at the world, I'm seeing through my aperture of the eye. When an animal looks at it, it looks differently. So when I'm looking at the world, for example, there are numerous philosophers who look at the world from a standpoint. So Darshana means looking at the world to understand a certain thing. That is it. That is what Darshana means. Darshakaha, right? The director of a movie is called Darshaka, right? We see cinematic, Darshaka. So he shows us something. He shows us something on the world. So that is why it's called Darshaka. So similarly, the Darshanikas, the philosophers, or Darshanikas, who shows us a path, who shows us something and makes us understand. So what happened was, so when they see this and they create a framework of logic and reason to understand the world, it becomes a Darshana. So Darshana means it is a framework using reason, logic, debate, which is Vada in Sanskrit, using Vada, and they create a framework that becomes a Darshana. So there are numerous Darshanas. So how do we know what Darshanas are? Where do you get all these names? They call Shad Darshana, Nyaya Vaisheshika, Sankhya Yoga, Pura Mimamsa, Uttara. Where do you get all these names from? They have been there for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Definitely thousands of years. Some of them hundreds of years. So Madhavacharya, he is a philosopher of the 14th century. He wrote a book called Sarva Darshana Sangraha. Sarva, all, Darshana, the philosophy, Sangraha, a compendium. So he wrote 16 darshanas in this book called Sarva Darshana Sangraha. From there, you get the list of 16 darshanas, of them the most fundamental ones upon which the material practical sciences have built on. This is the, like, imagine that you are building a house and you have the foundation. Foundation is the philosophy or darshana, and the house that you are living in with all the things that you are actually experiencing, that is the shastra. Bhautika Shastra, Rasayana Shastra, Natya Shastra, whatever Shastra you have. All those Shastras is like the practical application of the Darshana that is standing, upon which they are standing. So they may be standing on numerous Darshanas. It's not one Darshana. Usually that is the case. Each Darshana gives a framework upon which you build a science or you build a Shastra. So that is what the Darshana is. So what happened was, because Darshana is so fundamental, the sages or the philosophers who developed these science, these darshanas, became so reverent, so that they stopped questioning them. They became godlike. And then they became the authority of it. That is what happened during the 11th and 12th centuries, where we started seeing ourselves as intellectually superior. That is why when you look at our history, you don't see we going out and learning and coming back.
Absolutely. It's the other way around.
We did trade. Yeah, it is the other way around. We did trade with Romans and Chinese and other kingdoms. But most of them used to come to us and learn and then go out.
And then build on top of that, and build on top of that, and create different things which we never even tried to understand or look into or evolve.
Yeah. So that is why you see, when you look at the oldest philosophers like Plato, Pythagoras, Socrates, what they did was they were from that part of the Mediterranean belt, where Italy, Turkey, and those areas, right? So they got in contact with the philosophers they used to call gymnophysis, means naked philosophers, wandering naked philosophers belonging to the Bharatvarsha at that time. The Indian naked philosophers, they are wandering, they're not monks, they're wandering philosophers, wandering around spreading the knowledge. And that knowledge percolated through India, through what used to be Persian Empire before the Iran and before the Ottoman Empire took over that Arab. So you see, when you imagine in the map, you see that Mediterranean belt where Italy, France, current Italy, France, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and all that is there, right? And then you see India, China on this side. Everything that in between used to be ruled by what is called Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
Ottoman Empire was ruled by Muslim rulers.
Yes.
So they were the bridge between the East and the West. So even now they are the bridge, but in the past they translated a lot of Greek and Indian philosophies, and then they translated into Latin. They translated into Arabic, and some of them translated into Latin, and then that went throughout the rest of the Europe. Before this time, there was Persian Empire. So you had this percolation of this Indic knowledge through Persia, through Egypt, Northern Africa, and into the Mediterranean belt in 600. See, when you look at all this dating that they talk about, everything stops at 650 BCE. Buddha was 650 BCE. Everybody stops at 650 BCE because West does not want the world to think of any other philosophy that existed before Greeks.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So that is why everything stops at 650. But now we are discovering that no, it's not 650, it's 2000 BCE. Some of our philosophies existed 2000 years before Christ.
That would mean 4,200 something years from now. Back from now.
Yeah. But yeah, so you see this knowledge percolating. So in my book, I argue that knowledge did not travel from west to east. It actually originate or it actually traveled from east to west and then it came back to us again. Because that happens throughout the world. You have cyclical exchange of ideas. It can happen. Sometimes it dies. See, this is one great example is the Greek knowledge, because of the destruction of the Roman Empire by the Germanic tribes, by the barbarians, they destroyed the libraries of Alexandria, the cities of Alexandria, and everything. So, along with it, a lot of knowledge died. But the Arabs actually translated a lot of that knowledge and preserved it. Again, during the 11th and 12th century, this knowledge was revived and then went back into the West. So you see this knowledge transmission happening from time to time. Knowledge dies and then revives at a different place because somebody has translated it, and then it comes back to the original source land. So that is what I argue in this book, and I give evidence also with references that knowledge, Indic knowledge, not everything, but some parts of the Indic, very fundamental, very philosophical knowledge, questions like epistemology, ontology, and then we'll get into metaphysics and then logic. So this foundational structure of philosophy was very much there in our ancient darshanas. So coming back to the word darshana, so darshana has a certain framework based on reason. It is based on what is called pramana, prameya, pramata. So these are words that sound Sanskrit, but they have a very strong equivalence in the Western philosophy too. Pramana is epistemology. Epistemology means how do you obtain truth? How do you understand knowledge? If I see there is a disease in the body is not working properly. If there is disease, what are the tools you use to know it? These days, I'll give you an easy example. Let us say we have somebody comes with chronic or severe headache. What is the tool that you use? CAT scan or an MRI, right? Initially, you get history. You directly observe the patient. You see the patient. You see, okay, so these are the characteristics. And then the next step is I want to know what's inside. I want to use the tool of CAT scan or MRI to directly locate, isolate, analyze, and experiment. In other words, give treatment to it. Right, so that is one of the pramana. So that is pramana means pramakaranam, to understand what is happening. So that is pramana shastra. Pramana shastra is very abundant in Nyaya shastra. So it is one of the darshanas, philosophers of Nyaya shastra. They were a group of people. They were not gods. They are humans like you and me. But they have spent their time exclusively, their life and time and thought and everything into that, and they became so good at it. They developed a framework to aid other shastras to use them. So they created a body of knowledge.
Open source. It's like open source that you can use and modify. The fundamentals can be taken and then you can do whatever you want on top of that.
That's right. So for example, Ayurveda Shastra. Okay, Ayurvedam uses Pramana Shastra to understand what is going on inside the body. And then they also use Nyaya philosophers, Nyaya Darshana. They also said, okay, now you have Pramana Shastra. Now you need to use logic to arrive at truth. You just cannot. So you have all this data that's coming in. So how do you connect it to what's going on? So what is going on, which is the truth? Truth means true knowledge. In other words, if I have a brain tumor, I need to diagnose it, right? Oh, interesting. See, diagnosis. Dia means arriving at. Gnosis is knowledge.
Knowledge.
Right? Knowledge. Gnosis means gna. It comes from the root word gna, which means gnanam, which means knowledge. So, diagnosis. Arriving at truth or true knowledge is diagnosis. Right? So, when I want to arrive at the truth, in other words, when I want to diagnose it, I need tools. I also need to use reason and logic to arrive at it. So, if the person has such and such symptoms, based on my past experience or based on the knowledge that was already preserved, the corpus of knowledge, I'm saying that this patient probably has a brain tumor or bleed in the brain. I'm going to use another pramana to confirm it.
Yeah.
Right? So this is the Pramana Shastra, and then there is Vada Shastra, Pramana Vada. Right? So these type of things were put together under one Darshana, and then that Darshana became Nyaya Darshana.
So darshanas are basically a set of framework that
Yes.
is rooted in logic, that is rooted in observation, that is rooted in thinking and reasoning and everything. It is not something that was shown to someone by a higher or by an extraterrestrial alien or by any metaphysical element. These philosophies or darshanas, and when we'll move into all the various darshanas that we have, these have originated from the human mind.
Absolutely.
These are the originations of humanity, not
Yes.
any higher or spiritual being. Sorry, not spiritual being.
Absolutely.
Not
So-
any deity or not any higher being.
No. So now, see, here is where we get into the controversial part. So when Srinivas Ramanujan, the great mathematician from Tamil Nadu.
Oh, he's
So
an
when
anomaly. He's an anomaly.
Yeah. He's
I can't digest.
Yeah.
Please continue.
So people like him, when he came to direct theories, direct explanation of very complicated mathematics, when the Western Western mathematicians asked him, how did you arrive at it? You need a lot of steps to arrive at this truth, right? How did you directly arrive at the formula? The formula requires a lot of steps to arrive at it. But how did you just directly arrive at the formula? He said, a goddess comes to my mind and gives me the answer. So when this type of examples happen in our history, then we try to associate this. Okay, so he had a darshana, he had some deity come into his mind and gave the answer to him. And therefore, he is somebody who is different from the rest of us.
But Dr. Rajeev, what's your take? Sorry. Yeah, what happened?
My take is, there are so many examples like this. He happened to be in the contemporary period or before, roughly contemporary in the early 20th century, that we are taking him as an exception. But we have so many such exceptions. For example, Dmitry Mendeleev, right? Mendeleevian periodic table, right? We have periodic table. So Mendeleev, his name is Dmitry Mendeleev, or Mendeleevian periodic table. He woke up one day and said, I have these elements that came to my mind in their proper arrangement in my dream. And then he put together the period. He was the first one who put together the periodic table with a few elements. I don't remember how many elements, but he was the one who put together the periodic table. And we're expanding on the periodic table now. When I was studying, there were about 108. Now I think there are 118 periodic elements or something like that. But when he put it together, when somebody asked him, how did you come up with this periodic table? He said, it came to me in my dream. This spark of creativity, this spark of ingenuity comes to people because they have spent so much time thinking about it. People think that it is an overnight phenomena, but they have spent so much time on it, and that spark happens. And then that is why those people became exceptions. You always have exceptions. So, and now you connect that to saying that, oh, God appeared in their minds and told them this, and therefore they are not like us. We can also become like that, but it takes a lot of sadhana, it takes a lot of
discipline and practice.
A practice and so on and so forth. The same with, you have Panini, Patanjali, all these are sages who had this intuition. See, where do you get? So there is a great piece of art that an artist has created, okay, a painting or a sculpture, whatever. So you ask them, where did you get this idea from? They'll say, it just came to me in my mind. Okay, they don't say something very exceptional, okay, not something that is copied, something very extraordinary, exceptional. Like, for instance, Newton, he said, why did the apple fall to the ground and not upwards, right? So when people asked him, he said, it just occurred to me. He was 22. He was 22, I think, when that happened. So things happen to people and we try to associate that with something higher than human reason, but it is still part of reason. It is still within the realm of reason.
You can't take away the human effort in this thing. You cannot completely negate the human intellect and effort from the equation. And I think these higher entities, now a lot of philosophers and scientists have turned their attention to understanding consciousness.
Yes.
And now they're thinking, and a lot of people are also proposing that all these higher beings, they don't exist physically. These are just our consciousness levels that we yet have to achieve or yet have to arrive. So sometimes it's possible that we are able to tap into that higher level of consciousness without knowing how we did it.
That's right. That's right.
Without knowing how we did it, we skipped certain steps, and we're sometimes able to get a glimpse of something of a higher consciousness.
Absolutely. So when that happens, so these are the things that you cannot prove using empirical, using what we call scientific objectivity. You cannot go in and say, show me the evidence how you got this. Only then I'll believe it.
No.
But there are certain things that you cannot explain, and not because you cannot explain it, it cannot be untrue. Okay, it cannot be untrue. So there are many things in this world that you cannot falsify, you cannot disprove. You can only take it at its face value sometimes. But when it comes to science, within the realm of science, there is a certain, they narrow down this idea of philosophy into a narrow framework, and that is what we call science. So coming back to the Darshana, where we started this part of the conversation. So Darshana, the philosophers or Darshanikas, they have tapped into their subconscious to a certain extent, to that level that they were able to reason out, they were able to understand certain secrets, and then they created a framework and they said, this is how it happens. And they're not asking us to believe in anything. They're saying us, it's not about, see, these darshanas is nothing about belief. They're giving us the logic, the reason, the pramanas to arrive at what they are explaining, what they're proposing. They're actually, most of them are actually hypotheses. They're intelligent guesses.
There are two things that I would want to now have a discussion on. Now, the purpose would be for anyone who does not know anything about Vedas or Vedanta. If they listen to our conversation, they would understand A, what these texts are, what they are saying, what are their relevance in today's time, and if I read them, what and how will it impact my life or my mind or my operations in the daily life. So Dr. Rajeev, let's first start with the explanation of Vedas. What are the Vedas? Are they philosophical text? Are they a spiritual text? Are they a religious text? What are the type of Vedas? What are there in the Vedas? And why should I even be bothered about Vedas in the time of AI, in the times of technology, in the times when we are living in a material world? Why should I even think about it? So let's start with this thing first.
Yeah. This is a huge topic, but I'll try to condense it for our conversation.
So that they can get a summary, and then they can decide if they want to go deep into it or not. Stage is yours.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So the Vedas, it always starts with the root word. Vid comes from the Veda. The root word of Vedas comes from vid. Vid means knowledge. Gnana. Vid gnane. With this, there are numerous other explanations, but the most common, the most appropriate one is with gnane. So immediately you see this is not faith. Immediately you are talking about knowledge, right? So knowledge is something that you actually gain, you actually learn, you actually put to use. So Vedas is that corpus of knowledge which has many things. This we are talking about a civilizational corpus of knowledge. This is not something that we borrowed from some other. See, when we talk about Vedas, it is a product of a civilization that existed for thousands of years. And people over a period of time, We do not know because we don't know the exact origin story of the Vedas. We only know what later philosophers extrapolated from what they understood. It's called circumstantial evidence. Based on what they read and understood from the content of the Vedas, they explained, oh, this is the origin story of the Vedas. So over a period of hundreds, if not thousands of years, philosophers who are natural philosophers, they're also nature philosophers. They were living in nature, in communion with the nature, and they observed nature, and they said, this is how the world works. This is how the world works, and this is what we understood from it. And they started putting together a corpus of knowledge, and that huge corpus of knowledge was divided into mainly three parts by a philosopher, sage named Vyasa. The word Vyasa is also interesting. Vyasa means the one who divides, the one who categorizes. So this philosopher or sage philosopher, I like to call all these philosophers because they imparted so much wisdom to us. So Vyasa divided this corpus of knowledge based on a certain characteristics. And he said this part belongs to, this is the oldest, most primitive part that belongs to a category called Rig Veda. Rig Veda, right? The word Rig means mantra. Rik, R-I-K, Rik, R-K or R-I-K. Rik means mantra. Mantra is what? It is a short aphorism. Mananat trayate mantraha. Manana shilaha means one that will make you think. That was the original meaning of mantra. The one that will protect you is also mantra. By saying it, see, when we are in distress, sometimes we say a few things that will give us some comfort. Right? So that is another use of this mantra. So mananat trayate iti mantra. So by saying it, you are protected. That is mantra. So this collection of these short mantras, which are words, which are or sayings or words that has a certain potential to change certain things. These are mantras. So this part is called Rik Veda, that contains Rik or mantras. And then there are other categorizations. Then he said Rig, Yajus, Sama. Yajurveda has explanations of this mantra and certain rules of how to say it. So that became Yajurveda. And then Samaveda is how when you take the Rig Veda mantra and put it to meter, and then that becomes Sama. Sama Gana means the word, the singing of these, so that they elicit a certain vibration, and then they have certain benefits to it. So that becomes Samaveda. And then the later Atharvana Veda is the later Veda. These are all, we don't know the historicity of many of these things, but whatever evidence that we have, most of it written by the Western European philosophers, European colonizers. So we have that, the later Veda that contain parts of all these things, and also some Vidyas like Dhanur Vidya and things like that, and even Ayurveda, and parts of it, roots of seeds of it, became Atharvana Veda. So these are Rik, Yajus, Sama, Atharvana Veda. So this corpus of knowledge now becomes Vedas. So Jaimini, so we have a Darshana called Purva Mimamsa Darshana. Okay, so we have seen Nyaya Vaisheshika, they come in couplets. Nyaya Vaisheshika, Sankhya Yoga, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa. Purva Mimamsa Darshana has the main philosopher in that is Jaimini. His name is Jaimini. So he put together certain sutras or aphorisms in that called Purva Mimamsa Shastra. So we have Purva Mimamsa Darshana, we have Purva Mimamsa Shastra, where you have direct application of it. And he said Veda should be defined as Mantra Brahmana Yoho Veda Namadeyam. Means mantra, we already know, mantra or collection of mantras, it's called Samhita. And then you have Brahmana Yoho. Mantra, Brahmana parts together should be called Vedas. Okay, so mantra, just pure mantra. So for example, Purusha Suktam, right? Very popular one. Purusha Suktam, Sri Suktam, these mantras, they are actually a collection of mantras put together in one place called Purusha Suktam. By saying this, you get a certain benefit by saying this. So this is mantra, and then you have Brahmana. In Brahmana, you again divide into two parts, Aranyaka and Upanishad. Aranyaka is the upasana part of it. By doing meditative, contemplative side of, now you're not reciting mantras just for the sake of getting some material benefit. You are saying mantra for understanding the nature of the world. Contemplate, you mentioned about the super consciousness levels. So you may approach those super conscious levels and understand beyond what our five senses. See, if we have another sixth sense, you might be able to tap into things that the five senses are not giving to us. So this upasana gives us those extra perceptive capacities where you understand and again come back to this world and put that to use, right? So that is the upasana, that is the aranyaka, which is the aranya, comes from the word aranya, means forest. They are forest dwellers. So aranyaka, and then you get Upanishad. Upanishad is the penultimate, the essence of the entire Vedic corpus. Upanishad, the final part. It is only about 10% of the entire Veda corpus of knowledge that we have. It is only 10%, but that is the essence. This Upanishad is also called Veda Anta. Veda Anta, the ending of Vedas, or the summary of the Vedas, or the honey that you get, the nectar of Vedas is the Upanishads. So this is the broad categorization. So you have mantra bhaga. So what is the, so 80% of the Vedas consists of the mantra bhaga. Only 20% consists of the Aranyaka and the Upanishad. So what is the use of people knowing about these mantras? In those times, these mantras were recited for almost every important aspect of human life. See, you have rites of passage in human life, right? So from Garbhadanam to Antyeshti, means the where you die. Antyeshti is cremation. So Garbhadanam to Antyeshti, so you have 16 rites of passages, right? Roughly 16 rites of passages. So at each time of, from Garbhadanam to so Namakaranam, to so many other things that Hindus follow. So in each of these, they recite certain mantras. The priest comes and recites certain mantra. All these mantras are coming from the from the Vedas. So they take parts of the mantras and use it. So for example, Upanayanam, Vivaham, all these are all the rites of passages for any Hindu life. But there may be variations based on the type of work that you do, or where you belong to in the social strata, or the type of work that you do. So you have all these characteristics, and then you use these Veda mantras. Each Veda mantra, or from the Rig Veda or Yajur Veda, they have a certain potential to enable certain things to happen. So this was put together by these ancient sages, ancient philosophers, and said, when you do this, when you use it for this purpose, that will enable you to happen. For example, you want to win a battle, and you want to start off on a good note. And then the Veda gives certain instructions. Between Rig Veda and Yajur Veda, you get certain instructions of how to start off that process, when to start off, based on the timing of things. So sometimes you don't start a certain, for example, you are harvesting a crop. Okay, you are harvesting when do you harvest a crop? So it should be based on certain science, right? It should be based on certain reason. You just can't go and look at it and say, yeah, I'm going to harvest it now, right? So you have to look at the astronomy, you have to look at the environment, you have to see what is the need. All these things are rudimentarily put together in this Vedas. And by the way, Vedas have Veda Angas and Upavedas. This is my own book. I'm going to read it out from page 9. So you have Vedangas and Upavedas, right? So Vedangas are Siksha, which is phonetics, Vyakarana, grammar, Chandas, which is meter, and then Nirukta, which is etymology, how the words came into being, Jyotisha, astronomy, and Kalpa. Kalpa means rituals or how you conduct the ceremonies. And then this is Vedangas. And then Upaveda, you have Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, Gandharva Veda, and Ardhashastra. Governance, music, science, medicine, all these things, they all come under the Vedic corpus, Vedic knowledge. So now you see many of the things that we do in our daily life actually has its origin from the Vedas. And Vedas is not just mantras. So you have to put the Vedangas and Upavedas also into context. But if you say what is purely only in Vedas, then it is a mantra bhaga, 80%. And these mantras are used in our Shodasha samskaras. Those samskaras, the 16 samskaras that we do in our life are called Shodasha samskaras. So in that we use the Veda mantras. And everyday life, for example, you sit down to eat meal, okay, lunch. So what goes into the meal, where to start it, how to end it, and what is the content of your meal so that your health is preserved and you don't get diseases. All this is put together in Ayurveda. And this Ayurveda has its roots in Atharva Veda and the rest of the Vedas. So you can disconnect your life from the Vedas actually. So you have this mantra, Brahmana Yoho Vedanamadeim, right? Mantra and Brahmana. Brahmana, you have two divisions, and Aranyaka and Upanishad. And we can get into Upanishads maybe later when we get into that topic. But again, how do you preserve this knowledge? So this sounds like a lot of knowledge, right? This sounds like not just a single small book like this that you hold on, because this was developed over thousands of years. Not only thousands of years, it is developed from different parts of the subcontinent. So how do you communicate with the rest of the people from somewhere developed in Tamil Nadu to Kashmir or even Pakistan, even Afghanistan? How do you, or Indonesia, how do you communicate with all the philosophers? And to preserve this knowledge, what happened was a certain group of people said, we will take up this responsibility and preserve this knowledge, and formed collection groups called shakas. Shaka means
community
branch,
types,
right? Branches, right? So shaka means branch. So if you consider Vedic knowledge as a huge tree, like imagine a banyan tree, huge tree with a lot of branches, and each branch is preserving a certain aspect of this Vedic knowledge, and then they became shakas. In my book, I mentioned the whole entire shakas that were available at the time when Patanjali was writing his book called Mahabhashya. Somewhere around 1500 to 2000 years ago, he wrote a book called Mahabhashya. In that he mentions during his time when he was living, these are the shakas that were available at that time. So he lists numerous shakas at that time, and Rigveda had at that time 21 shakas, and now there are only 2 that are surviving. They are called Shakala and Bhaskala Shaka. So what these shakas means, they are not branches of Vedas. They are people, groups of people who selected parts of the Vedas and said, because this was before the written script was invented, before there was writing instruments were there. So they used oral transmission of knowledge, and they said, this piece of group of people amongst ourselves, Brahmins or priests, they said, we will preserve these shakas, and they came to be known either from the place they were living, or the person who was the originator of it, or based on certain characteristics of the knowledge that they are preserving. The reason why this Vedic knowledge, which is thousands of years of old, still survived despite destruction of kingdoms, colonial conquests, and famines, and pandemics, and everything, is because of this kind of organization arrangement. It is not enough that you make money, right? For us, it is not enough you have to preserve it, otherwise it will be gone in no time. So I spend so much of my time and effort earning money or earning certain wealth, whatever wealth that is, and I don't take care of it. It will be gone in no time. So I have to create systems to preserve it. So we created, Indic philosophers created a certain system spread throughout the Bharatavarsha. It is not just belonging to one area. This is spread throughout the Bharatavarsha at that time, or it's the Indian subcontinent. That is why I like to call Indian subcontinent, not India as a country itself at that time, because it expanded so vast.
It was a civilization. It was a civilization, not a
civilization. This is how you preserve a civilization over thousands of years. So if you had, let us say, Alexandria, Library of Alexandria, you have all this knowledge and you didn't preserve it, it's all gone. It's all gone. So even for us, only 1% is preserved. Despite so much organization, 1% is preserved. Even in that 1%, I write in my book all that details. Even in that 1%, a lot of it is still not translated yet. It is still laying in many libraries.
That's a great loss. Yeah, that's a great loss. And I wonder if you are able to uncover and if you are able to decipher, or if you are able to interpret whatever has been written. I think we'll have a very strong ecosystem. And I think a lot of, okay, Dr. Rajeev, now that we've understood the Vedas, I want you to tell us what then I'm coming to Upanishads, because Upanishads kind of is like the summary of the Vedas. As you said, Upanishad takes up everything from the Vedas and in a very concise form, in a very digestible form. If you were to explain to a layman what is the core philosophy of the Upanishad in 2 lines or 1 line or 3 line, what would that be?
So explaining it in 2 or 3. So Upanishads is talking about what the Westerners called as metaphysics.
Yes, let's go into it.
So
can we first define what is metaphysics?
So metaphysics is that aspect of our reality, that aspect of reality that is not accessible to objectification. That is not accessible to objectification. For example, there are numerous ways of defining it, but I find this an interesting way to do it, because see, you have matter and you have something beyond matter, right? You have body and you have mind. You have body and then you have mind. So mind is something that you cannot, most of the time you cannot measure it. Anything that goes beyond measurable, that becomes metaphysics. Most often than not, it becomes metaphysics. For instance, I ask a question about where does consciousness arise from? Okay, so that is what Upanishads is primarily talking about. What is the origin of this phenomenal world? I'm not talking about Earth, planet Earth. I'm talking about the entire space and time. Where did it originate from? Where did it come from? That is what Upanishad is asking those questions. And whereas the rest of the 80% of the Vedas is talking about the regular transactional phenomenal world. How to, when to harvest, how to win a war, when to have a child, how to get married, and when to do. See, these are all phenomenal material world that we live in. That is comprises 80% of the Vedas. And then the rest of it, people who actually wanted to know the deeper truths about the origins of the universe. See, that is why I'll get into that in a minute, in a moment. So Upanishads is talking about something that is the foundation of the phenomenon. If you talk about the phenomenon as the phenomenal world that you see, the thing that is responsible for it is called noumenon, phenomenon, right? So Upanishad is going beyond that is directly observable and asking those questions. These are the philosophers that actually asked these questions long before Socrates, long before Pythagoras, long before Plato had even thought about it. Because you will see Plato, Pythagorean, and Socratean philosophy actually mimicking Vedantic knowledge. You will see this when you read Plato, for example, when you read Plato or Pythagoras, they talk about transmigration of soul. Pythagoras, transmigration of soul. God is not a single entity. God is something that is pervasive and beyond the world. And you will see them talking about vegetarianism. Pythagoras was a pure vegetarian, by the way. So you will see them. So later, initially, you see a homogeneous philosophy that has spread across both Indic civilization and what we now see the Persian civilization and into the Mediterranean civilization. There is a pervasive, very interesting homogeneity of the philosophy spread throughout. And then you will see the greatest philosophers are also Vedantins spread across. So Vedanta, in other words, it is talking about the foundational basis of this phenomenal world. That is what? Where do we come from? Who am I? Where do we go after this is gone? This transient body is gone. These are the questions. See, this is very distinct from the mantra bhaga of the Vedas, where they're talking about material world. Upanishad is, the word Upanishad comes from the root word Upanishadlu. Shadlu is the root word or the verb, root dhatu. Upa samipe means near. Ni nishchayena, definitely. Shadlu means Visarana Gati Avasadhaneshu. Means the three different meanings to it. Visarana Gati Avasadhaneshu, which means that which cuts off the bonds or the bondages, or that which gets you closer to the ultimate truth. So what is the ultimate truth? What is the phenomenal truth? That is what Upanishad is talking. Upanishad is not saying, I'm going to show you God. Upanishads, for example, in one of the Upanishads, the question arises. Upanishads are always, most of the time, they're in the form of a dialogue between a teacher-student, between a husband and wife, between guru-shishya, between two friends, between Nachiketa and Yama, who are also a teacher-student relationship. This is always in the form of a dialogue. One asking the question, the second one is always not giving the direct answer. The guru is always suggesting the student, you go and find out. I'll give you certain clues. You go and find out. So Upanishadic knowledge is most of the time in the form of negation, what we call neti, because it is not something that you can observe directly. And therefore, how do you arrive at a truth that you cannot directly observe with your five senses? Through negation. So that is how they arrive at the truth through completely opposite form that we use in the material world. See, we talked about empirical science, right? So how do you arrive at the true knowledge? By direct observation, by location in space and time. But what you are asking me in Upanishad, the teacher is saying, is not located in space and time. It is the cause of the space and time itself. So how can I show you within the space and time that which created the space and time, that which is beyond it? That imagine the space and time as a bubble. The bubble, the one who is blowing the bubble is outside the bubble. I cannot show. It is not part of the bubble. It is outside of it. So the only way to know that is through negation. So in other words, when they talk about Guru, can you tell me what caused this phenomenal world? Who is responsible for it? By knowing which I know everything. Kasminnu bhagavo vignate sarvam idam vignatam bhavati iti. Kasminnu bhagavo vignate. By knowing, hey Bhagavan. Bhagavan means not God. Hey Bhagavan, it is out of respect. Hey Bhagavan. Kasminnu bhagavo vignate. By knowing what? Sarvam idam. All this. Vignatam bhavati. I will understand everything else by knowing which. Not I will understand how to drive a car. By knowing which, how this world existed or came into being, how it is surviving, where it will go back when all this dissolves. So that is what the student is asking. The teacher is saying the same thing in Sanskrit. Yatova imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanti abhisamvishanti tad vijignasasva tad brahmeti. That is Brahman, from which everything came into being, by which everything is sustaining, into which everything will dissolve back. That is, imagine a person blowing a bubble, like the whole bubble coming with the colors, and then it's going back. So by which a person, by the source from which everything is coming into being, everything is sustaining, and into which it will go back. That is Brahman. That is what you roughly call God, or what you call Brahman, what you call ultimate reality. So that is the source of that is the conscious, what we call in English these days, it's become very fashionable word in circles in the West also, not just the East, the ultimate consciousness, the ultimate reality from which all this has come into being. So now you might say, what is the use of all this knowledge?
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. It's a very valid question. Yeah.
Very valid question. So why do you spend so much time on learning? What is the big deal? Where do you come from? Where do I go? I'm just living here. I'll just enjoy, experience life. So now what happens is human beings go through these motions of ups and downs in their life. They take it for real. They take it for granted. They take, this is the ultimate, this is the true reality. That, and then they go through these motions, and then they go through these ups and downs of life and take it for real and suffer. So what the Upanishadic philosophers is saying is, you suffer because you didn't understand the truth. If you understood the truth, you will see that what you are suffering is just, it is just part of this game that we are playing, right? Like a stage show. On the stage show, you are acting as a person, and you are so involved in that person, you took that person as your role for granted. And then you are suffering, right? You are going through the motions of the role that you have taken, and you forgot your true nature who is outside the stage. So come back and see that you are actually a stage player in this play called the world. You are playing the role of whatever role you have picked on or chosen or pushed into, and you took that role for granted. You suffer because you took this for real and you didn't understand the real nature of things. So the goal of Upanishadic knowledge is Sukha Prapti Atyantika Dukkha Nivritti. Dukkha Nivritti means cessation of suffering, right? So that is what Gautama Buddha struggled, because he was a prince, right? He had a prince, and he had everything. He had maids, he had women, he had money, he has a kingdom, he had mother, father, everybody. I mean, he was a young man at that time. So why should he ask these questions? Because he was seeing people suffering. And then he asked the question, why do people suffer? And then he actually, when you look at the life of Gautama Buddha, the historical Gautama Buddha, you will understand the beauty of Vedanta, actually. Although he didn't belong to the Vedantic group, he was still to me, he's a Vedantin of a different kind. So he kept on asking all the people, learned people at that time, why do people suffer? And then he was not convinced. He was not happy with the answers they were giving. So he went on to discover himself. He said, I will discover it myself. Why do people suffer? And he left his kingdom. So if I say happy, so what is the goal of human life? The goal of human life is to have happiness, right? So ultimately, I can tell any Sanskrit words, I can tell any English technical knowledge. I can say Purushartha is Dharmartha Kama Moksha. So moksha means much. If it comes from the word much dhatu, means to cut off from the bondage is moksha. So that is liberation. Liberation from what? Liberation from bondage. Liberation from suffering. Right? So all of us want freedom from suffering ultimately. But Vedanta is saying, no, you think your next job, next promotion, next set of money or marriage or relationship is going to give you happiness. No, it will not. It is only going to bind you further. And the more you attach yourself to these things, the more you are binded or bonded into this play that you are playing. So for you to come out of suffering, you should have a true knowledge of who you actually are. So that is what Vedanta is telling us.
That is so profound.
Yeah, it is very profound. So Vedanta is not some esoteric philosophy that only scholars, pundits, people who know Sanskrit should know. Every human being, in fact, if animals can speak our language, even they should know this. So every human being should understand why we suffer, and Vedanta is giving us a platform to approach the truth in a certain way. Some people get it directly, some people need to learn it, go through a certain steps, or whatever way that is. So there are scholars, there are gurus or philosophers like Jiddu Krishnamurti, like Aurobindo, like Osho, and those people, they have given us a certain ways to approach the truth. For example, Jiddu Krishnamurti, he says that truth is a pathless land. Okay, truth is a path. There is no path to truth because you are the truth. Because so if see a person who imagine that you are I'm dreaming in the middle of the night and I'm a character in my own dream. Okay, character, and I'm suffering in that dream, or I go through phases. I'm enjoying, sometimes I'm suffering, and I go through a period of extreme suffering, and somebody, a guru type, comes in and says, listen, you are suffering because you took this dream for real. You are not the one, you are only a character in the dream. See, listen, the one who is dreaming is actually sleeping soundly. So, but the person who is suffering says, no, how can I be the character in the dream? He says, no, listen, you see me, I'm suffering right now. How can you say that I'm only a character that is thinking that I'm real? And so he doesn't understand it. Now the guru says and opens his eyes and says, listen, when the person who is dreaming wakes up, you're going to disappear. Watch it. And the person wakes up in the morning and then the dream is gone. There is no character there. There is nothing. So there are different ways of explaining it. It becomes, depending on the student or the pupil or the seeker, the teacher uses various methods to make him understand that you are playing a character. And we can actually see that. And if I look at my own life, I go through my life and then I add one bond after another, one bondage after another, thinking that the next step in my life is going to give me happiness. Otherwise, why would if I think that this is going to give me sorrow, I won't take up that next step. I won't come to America if I feel like coming to America would make me more sorrowful. There are people who come to America, Canada, wherever, whatever country, and realize that this is not giving me happiness. So I need to reevaluate what if my decision is right or not. Correct? And then there are people who get into relationship and feel that in hopes of getting happiness, I got into this relationship, and now whether they're happy or not, they'll evaluate and then reassess their situation. So thinking that you get happiness, we do many things in life. Atyantika dukkha nivrutti means once for all destruction of that. It does not mean that you don't do things. That is why.
But detachment. So basically, you are saying detachment.
But in my other book, I call it passionate detachment. So you don't detach and become inert and become a burden to the society. When you actually understand your true nature, you become an active participant and actually help others to come out of the suffering.
You were about to say something about Sri Krishna.
Yeah. So Sri Krishna, when he is imparting a certain knowledge to Arjuna, he is not saying quit Arjuna and become a sannyasi, right? He's not
absolutely. Yeah, he's not asking him to be ascetic. Yeah,
ascetic. So he's saying you understand the truth, then you'll do the right thing, which is dharma for that period of time, for that situation. You do the right thing, which is the dharmic thing. And for you to do that, you need to know the truth. You need to understand the reality. He's not giving him more powers to fight Krishna could have given Arjuna all the weapons, all the powers in the entire world to destroy even Bhishma, to destroy everybody. But he didn't do that. He imparted knowledge to him. By giving knowledge, Arjuna already had the potential to do it, but intellectually, knowledge wise, he did not have the courage to do it. So Krishna imparted a certain knowledge. So, and also Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I'm not talking religion here, I'm talking about knowledge, Vedantic knowledge, right?
Gyan.
So, Jnana. So, of course, this is part of the religion and there is no dispute, there is no question about it. But this is not faith, this is not belief, this is true knowledge, Jnana. So, Krishna is saying, Yadate moha kalilam buddhir vyatitarishyati, tada gantasa nirvedam srotavyasya srutasya cha. What this means is, yada, when yadate moha kalilam, when your ignorance falls away, when your ignorance is destroyed, yadate moha kalilam, buddhir vyatitarishyati, your buddhi shines, moha kalilam buddhir vyatitarishyati, tada gantasi nirvedam, only then your suffering ceases. He's not saying your suffering ceases if you win over the war. Yadate moha kalilam buddhir vyatitarishyati tada gantasi nirvedam. He doesn't stop there. Srotavyasya srutasya cha. You don't need any Vedas, Upanishads or anything for that. You don't need any teaching. Once your moham gets destroyed, once your ignorance gets destroyed, you don't need anything more. So that is what Upanishad is giving us. This is so Nyaya Vaisheshika gave us rules of logic, rhetoric, debating, Vada Prativada. Vaisheshika is giving us ontology about Anu, Paramanu, and all those things, understanding the world as a material world. Sankhya is telling us how we evolved from Mahat, from Prakriti, Purusha, Mahat, Ahankara, Buddhi, and so on. And you see, from material, we are slowly getting into the abstract. And then you get to Purva Mimamsa, philosophers are giving us how to correctly interpret the mantras and the Brahmanas within the Vedas. And ultimately, you get to the Vedanta. It is saying, okay, you have done all this. No, did you get happy? Did you get happiness? Did you find happiness in what you have done? No, sir. Now you question why not. That is because all that you have done so far is based on ignorance of your true nature. Now I'm going to introduce you to the true nature, and that is who you actually are. And that I cannot explain you but in a positive way, because I cannot show you this is who you are. I can only show you through negation. Vedanta takes you upside down of everything that you have learned in a positive way to arrive at the truth. And by saying that only by negation, you leave out all that is untrue, and whatever left, it is like
would be the core. Would be your core and would be the truth. That's a profound. I mean, I wish if people, I mean, just by hearing this last conversation, if nobody gets inspired, that means they are missing out on something great, because Dr. Rajeev, this is so, I mean, the way you explained about the Upanishads and everything, it's so beautiful. It hit me on so many levels, and thank you for saying that. That's absolutely. Dr. Rajeev, I want to summarize this entire conversation that we have had with one last question.
Okay.
And I really want people to, understand, according to you, what is the one major core difference between the Indian darshanas and the Western philosophy? What is that one thing that differentiates the Indian darshana from the Western philosophies? And you can also include the modern Western philosophies as well. If there is no difference, you can say that. If there is a difference which is more favorable to them, you can say that. If there is a difference which is more favorable to us, you can say that.
Yeah. So it makes it very difficult to say one difference, because there are numerous differences. But what I would say is that to look at the world at two different levels at the same time, at a phenomenal level and at a immaterial level, at a phenomenal and a nominal level. So the Western philosophers looked at the world at a phenomenal level. They talked, old Western philosophers like the Greek philosophy, they talked about morality, law, order, and things like that, which is the phenomenal aspect of us. And then they lost it. After that, for almost 2000 years, the Abrahamic religions took over the West, and then it became what is called Christendom, the Christian kingdom or Christendom. And then 1400 years ago, there was another split in that part of the world, and then a new religion came into being, and then they took over, they imposed or projected or had their own philosophies into it. But our Indic civilization, Bharatiya civilization, maintained their integrity throughout their history by saying that, yeah, there is the transactional world, and you need to survive, you need to thrive in that transactional world, and here are the foundational principles of it. Don't stop there. And then there is another world that you took it for granted, you took it for real, and then that is this supra-conscious level or higher level, where you actually start questioning everything that you took for granted, including the one who questions. Not only question everything, but also question the questioner. That I find it very interesting in Indian philosophy. See, I can question you, I can question all theories, but questioning the questioner itself, the nature of it, that is what is missing in the Western philosophy. Like you have pramana, prameya, pramata, right? So pramana is the tools we use to study something. Pramana, prameya. Prameya is the actual knowledge, the truth that you are studying. So if I want to study brain, then I use these tools to study the brain. I discover drugs or surgery, procedure, whatever. Then pramata, Western philosopher says pramata is not that important, because pramata is using rule-based logic. The rules are there, rule-based logic to arrive at truth. Our philosophy is saying, don't ignore the pramata, which is the agent who is doing it, because the agent may be biased. If the agent is using a pharmaceutical company, then he will turn the research study in to suit that company's interests. So don't underestimate the pramata. So this is another interesting thing that I found. So pramana, prameya, pramata, the agent who is doing is as important as the experiment itself.
Thank you for this, Dr. Rajeev. And I'm going to show this book again to the people. It's a beautiful book. I have read it. It is phenomenal. And I think if people can read it and then get interested in going deep into a particular philosophy and school of thought, because the way you have explained and defined everything is very brilliant, it will give people a very great overview. And the conversation that we have had, that in itself would be very great for people to understand. And thank you for all the wisdom and knowledge, Dr. Rajeev, that you shared. How did you enjoy the podcast? I was speechless in so many areas. I was just listening. I can just listen to you because it was very profound. I hope.
Yeah, I too enjoyed, Raghavji, this podcast, the questions you asked, and the space you gave me to answer rather than interrupting. So that was the best part of it, because that will give me some continuity of thought. To continue and complete what the speaker wanted to say. So that was another great part of this podcast. And I love the conversation. I spent so much time researching. I continue to, and even when I'm reading that book, my own book, I feel like, okay, so there are parts that I could, instead of saying hymns, I could just have said mantras in the book. So, but at the time, that was the right thing to do. But sometimes you have to put the words to make it easy for a layman to understand. So overall, wonderful podcast, wonderful topic, a topic that I love the most.